Let's get to Eunice, Yoon in China, where stocks did plunge overnight on some dismal trade data. And I want you to be thinking as you're talking to us, Eunice, about how much of it do you ascribe to the trade war that Trump has initiated, the president has initiated, and just domestic issues that we are highlighting about China as well. I just wonder 50-50, 80-20. I just wonder what you really think is what caused it? What caused it to be so dismal?
Well, part of it is seasonal factors. Okay. So January and February numbers tend to be distorted. So there is, in part, seasonal reasons because the Lunar New Year holiday fell in February. But like you said, there are a lot of economists right now who are going through these numbers and say that is not the only part of the story, that the U.S. tariffs as well as the global slowdown also affected both the exports as well as the imports because everything looked pretty bad. So I'll just run through the numbers quickly. One was that the exports plummeted, as you guys were talking about, 20.7% from a year ago. So this is the worst in 3 years, compared to a drop of 4.8%. The imports also fell by 5.2% from a year earlier, compared to an expected 1.4% decline. And that's where people are saying that we could also be seeing the impact of a global slowdown, and that in the coming months it's still going to look pretty bad. The stock markets fell to a 5-month low, and that's weighed down in part because of the sentiment around these numbers, which is, it wasn't the only factor, but it was a big part of the reason. And also the trade data was added to the discussion that's going on at the National People's Congress, the big annual gathering where there are several different lawmakers. And the foreign minister today spoke about the U.S.-China trade talks and said that the U.S. and China negotiations have made substantial progress. But I was speaking to one source of mine who's familiar with the Chinese side of the negotiations, and he had said that right now it's looking really unclear whether or not the U.S. and China are going to have a trade deal, because as you're walking around the halls at the NPC, what has become clear is that there is a big division right now among the policymakers as to how this is all going to go. There's one camp that believes that, and this is adding to the trade numbers that we saw today, that the economy is bad for us, a variety of reasons, and so we just need to get this deal done. On the other hand, there are quite a few others who are feeling that China is giving up too much right now to the Americans, and so they don't necessarily want to see a trade deal done. And I think that really highlights how difficult things will be for some of the negotiators, like the Vice Premier Liu He, because at the end of the day, they need to sell this trade deal back home. So it's going to be harder for them to make some more concessions to the Americans, given that sort of backdrop.
Eunice, what is it that the Chinese citizens are unhappy about? Is it that they have to stop stealing intellectual property? Is it that they're going to have to lower tariffs on their goods if they don't want tariffs on ours?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say because from a citizen's perspective, I mean, if you ask somebody, say within like the manufacturing sector or something, the people I talk to in the manufacturing sector just want the tariffs to go away. So that's their priority. But when you talk to people at the NPC, the policymakers are, there is this national pride element where a lot of Chinese policymakers don't want to be seen as giving in to the Americans. And there's a historical precedent as well, because there's a whole narrative in China that China has been a victim to foreigners for a very long time, and they don't want to be seen as giving up some sort of deal that would be good for foreigners but not good for China. So that's all playing into it as well. But and then on top of that, there is just this current feeling among a lot of people within the government, just like with Xi Jinping, that China needs to be able to stand strong and look as though it's making its decisions on its own and that it's not being cowed by an outside power.